Annual message to the Congress on January 4th last.
When I first discovered news media was back in World War II, when I was 5 or 6 years old. We would listen to FDR on the radio, and we would get some news broadcasts on the radio. We'd get the newspaper delivered to our mailbox. It would be like about 2 days late, and the news from the war would be even older.
Do you remember, like, as a kid coming home and listening to the radio? Like, what was it like in your household?
We used to listen to the radio, and mostly for newscasts. And FDR would have his fireside chats on the radio. And I can remember gathering around the radio and having a bomb threat where we would turn off all the lights and shut the blinds and huddle up to the radio and see what was happening. That's my earliest recollection.
Americans as a whole are feeling a lot better, a lot more cheerful than for many, many years.
So that's where I started. And from there, we went into black and white TV and Edward R. Murrow.
The actions of the junior senator from Wisconsin have caused alarm and dismay amongst our allies abroad and given considerable comfort to our enemies. And whose fault is that? Not really his. He didn't create this situation of fear, he merely exploited it, and rather successfully. Cassius was right. The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves. Good night, and good luck.
We would get just one station and one slant on the news, if you will, one take on it, and it would be maybe a few days old or even a week old. And finally we get up to the Vietnam area where we would get different anchors. We would get the ABC, NBC, you know, the major networks, and we would see them on color TV, and it would be a lot more current. Like the war in Vietnam, we'd see the soldiers fighting and all, and it would be fairly current, but not exactly at that moment.
Colonel Cheatham, what's the objective, and what are your men about to do?
Well, I've got two companies here that are just about to clear the next 2 blocks up. I've got one company in this big building here that I guess it's the end of the Way University.
And the 3 news channels, surprisingly enough, would almost have the same format every night. For example, they might lead off with a hurricane, and you would see that on all 3 networks. Almost the same format, which I thought was kind of interesting. In today's time frame, you're actually right there in the battleground with a news person, and you can, like, we saw the rockets being fired at Israel, and a news announcer would actually be ducking and covers and you were right in it.
This is where the rocket impacted, right on the ground here. A taxi was just on the other side of the road. It's blown out the windows, but within seconds, the emergency services right on the scene.
What we have now is cable news, which is competing with the 3 networks, and cable news is giving you instant news all day long, and it gives you a different viewpoint. So that's a pretty dramatic change. The possibilities for news today is endless. We have news and things on Facebook and Twitter and the internet, and what you see on the internet may or may not be true. You have to sort that out on your own. And the same is probably true on the news channels, because there's been many instances when they're really actually probably trying to rush the news and be the first with a story, whereas so they misrepresent, not intentionally, but misrepresent the facts simply because they're trying to rush the news story in the press. And Tom Brokaw, for example, has been very biased in that regard, because he actually, I believe he published or made some comments about letters and things that didn't actually exist, and when they caught him on it, he couldn't produce those letters. So there's definitely a bias, and then there's that, as I said before, there's that rush to get a news story out there before anyone else. So I think the news today is more truthful. I think it's more reliable because we have several media outlets to compare it against, whereas at one point we only had the three networks. We now have many other avenues for getting the news. Some media outlets are not truthful. They're definitely biased, but we have the means now of sorting that out, so we can evaluate the news and make our own conclusions, and we can compare to make sure we are getting the right news. We're not just having to take it as we used to have to. I use a lot of the websites. The local news channels have websites. There's all kinds of websites on the TV that I go to. Excuse me, on the internet. Well, yes, I have I have two websites actually, and I use Facebook and Twitter as a way of promoting my website, and my website in turn is promoting products that I want to sell. So I'm taking advantage of the social media to promote my own interests, economic interests, you might say.
What did you think when the internet was first coming out? Did you think that it would ever be this big of a source for media and stuff? Did you see the potential in it?
No, I don't believe I did. I'm slow to grasp new ideas, and I'm sure it caught me by surprise, and I had no idea it'd ever be the way it is today, with everyone connected almost full time with iPhones and laptops and iPads. It would just blow my mind if anyone had ever told me there would be anything like this 10 or 15 years ago. I just wouldn't believe it. Well, I'll continue to follow the changes in the internet, but and I sure will, because there's such great potential there, and the power you have with the internet and Google. You can look things up, and vast knowledge right at your fingertips certainly makes things far more productive in my life. So I'll stay with it, but I'm not into using the iPhones yet, or connecting with the phone to the internet, smartphones. I'm still using my flip top, as you can see, and it does everything I need to do. If I want to get on the internet, I'll just use my pretty much my desktop computer, and that's fine. I'm very comfortable with that. I don't feel that I have to stay connected every single moment. I don't think I'll ever get into texting, because it's just too time consuming, and I'm too clumsy with the keys, and it's so much easier to use voice, frankly. So I'm sort of digging in my heels. I don't understand how apps work, but I can see tremendous power there. And for example, I have a website that I developed for trout fishing, and I'd like to have an app where they could check out my trout site and maybe pick out a stream on there right from the apps, and even have the coordinates so they could find it on their GPS. So there's a lot of technology there that I wish I could use, but I'm sure I'm not able to understand it, and I don't have a phone that uses apps, although I think it's a tremendous technology and has a lot of usefulness in the future. How I feel about technology today is just the way my wife's grandfather used to be. Back in the 40s, he lived on a farm, rural neighborhood, and he never learned how to drive. Whenever he wanted to go to town, 7 or 8 miles, he would always ask the neighbor to take him, and he'd actually pay him to take him into town. Well, I couldn't understand that. Why wouldn't he learn how to drive? He was probably in his 60s, maybe 70s at that time. But now that I'm 70, and I feel I've had all the technology I really need, and so I don't embrace the smartphones and the new technology of today, and I can understand now how he felt back then.